Welcome to another edition of Longevity Kitchen with me, Julie Gibson Clark. And tonight we are going to make bread. And before I lose any of you, this is super easy. It's literally just mixing up a bunch of bird seed, putting it in a dish and baking it. No kneading, none of rising, none of that stuff. So there's one tiny little step in here that's like a 2-hour step, unassisted. We'll get into it. So this is super easy. I call this bird bread because it's literally like all the stuff you would put out for the birds to eat. And we're just gonna mix it up with some water and some maple syrup and some ghee and it's going to be a delicious, it's like one of the most delicious and probably one of the healthiest breads, certainly one of the easiest breads on this planet to make. So let's get started. Before I do though, I thought, you know what, let's review the processes of accelerated aging. So these are the processes that will accelerate your aging. So inflammation is one of them. So inflammation is like, you know, that response to threats when like their chronic response. I say this, when you're chronically responding to threats and you have that chronic inflammation. We're not talking about periodic inflammation. Say you cut your finger and it becomes inflamed to heal itself, right? We need that process. That's really important. It's when something's always coming at us. So like say you have a cavity you haven't dealt with, or you live in a very like polluted environment. Your body's always going to be trying to fight and heal itself. And so it's creating that inflammation. That chronic inflammation is going to accelerate your aging. Another process is oxidative stress. So this is like the cellular equivalent of rusting caused by all these free radicals. Again, you know, I'm thinking of pollution, different things out there that cause, you know, oxidative stress in the body. Then the third is metabolic dysfunction. And so this is when our systems for processing energy become like a lot less efficient. So one process, like I want you to imagine like a 4-year-old and they're beautiful, glowing and like their supple skin, and it's just, oh, they're just so cute in their cheeks and all of that. And then imagine somebody in their 70s. So that, you know, you can see the metabolic changes in that difference just on their skin. Now there's normal aging, right? But we're talking about accelerated aging. So if you constantly increase that metabolic dysfunction, then you are going to age yourself a little faster. And one of the ways we can slow that down is using senolytics, to start to detox the zombie cells. I talked about that in my fasting episode. That's one aspect. There are many other things, but this bread has a lot of ingredients that help fight accelerated aging. So let's talk about that. The star of the show is an ingredient called Himalayan tartary buckwheat. Now, this is a little different than regular buckwheat. So buckwheat, Himalayan or otherwise, is the seed of the flowering plant. So it's not wheat at all. It's actually a seed. But Himalayan tartary buckwheat, as the name suggests, grows in these harsh mountainous conditions. And because of that, for some reason, when plants grow in these harsh conditions, they tend to create a lot more polyphenols. And I'm not exactly sure why. I just know that I've heard that in passing. And this is no different. So antioxidant, anti-inflammatory effects, with all the amount of polyphenols in here. It's also very rich in flavonoids, so like rutin, quercetin. I think there's another one, I'm going to mispronounce it, hesperetin. I don't know much about that one, but I do know about rutin and quercetin. Those are both, quercetin being a senolytic and rutin being very good for your internal organs. And anyway, that's 10 to 100 times more than a common buckwheat. So common buckwheat has it as well, but these polyphenols are what give it this tartary buckwheat has like kind of a very bitter, distinct bitter flavor. And again, polyphenols and flavonoids, of course, very, very good for your health and your inflammation, oxidative stress, and metabolic dysfunction, all three. So wonderful. And then it has a lot of resistant starch. Now we've talked about resistant starch in a previous episode and how that increases your butyrate. I was just reading another article today about increasing butyrate and how it was good for your gut and then consequently your brain and your mood, and your sleep. Wow, right? I mean, so we always want to be looking for ways to increase our resistant starch and different fibers. So, oh, the other thing, tartary buckwheat is a complete protein, and it is full of magnesium, zinc, and B vitamins. But complete protein, people, like how cool is that? Like all the essential amino acids. Now, this is developed, it was kind of made popular maybe by Dr. Jeff Bland, who is the father of functional medicine, and he started a company called Big Bold Health, and he sells it there. I have zero affiliation. They don't even know I'm making this. I just learned about this about 5 years ago, and I really have been looking for ways to incorporate it into our diet. They have a few recipes on the site. I'll make sure to put a link to some of the other recipes. There's a banana bread that is out of this world, and they also have pancakes that are very, very good. But there are some other things in this bread that are super good for fighting accelerated aging. We've got flaxseed and chia seed. Now, the flax seeds we are actually not going to grind, and you really do need to grind flaxseed to get all the benefits. But chia seeds have similar benefits, and you don't need to grind them. So they're high in alpha-linolenic acid, which is omega-3 fatty acids, which, I think is super good for, we always want to keep that omega-3 acid to omega-6 acid profile. You want to increase those omega-3s so that profile, that ratio is better, higher and higher. So if you're eating a lot of plant oils, you're getting a high amount of omega-6s, and you want to increase your omega-3s to have a healthy ratio, better for your brain health, your heart health, all kinds of things. And then all three of these, along with the psyllium seed, I always miss it up. There's a ton of fiber in these, and I'm sort of giggling because there's a ton of fiber in the tartary buckwheat. There's a ton of fiber in the nuts, and we're going to talk about pumpkin seeds. There's so much fiber in this bread, and I don't know, it always brings a smile to my face because I think of an old Saturday Night Live skit, and if you guys know it, you'll probably laugh right along with me. It's called Colon Blow. And I will have to find a link and put it in the show notes because if you've seen the commercial, I'm sure you're laughing now because you can see the visual is, I won't even get into the visual, it's hilarious, but the name, as the name suggests. So this is very high in fiber. So we've got the psyllium, we've got chia, and we've got flax. Anytime you're trying to increase your fiber, putting seeds on the top of things will just up it immediately. So that's really great. Okay, so it also has pumpkin seeds. Now, the original recipe calls for, I think, sunflower seeds, and you can use those too, and they are very good for you. They definitely have health benefits. I love using pumpkin seeds because they're very high in zinc, and I'm always trying to get more zinc in my diet, especially, or for my son too. He tends to be chronically deficient in zinc, so we're always trying to increase that. And then there's a lot of plant compounds like phytoesterols, which are really good at blocking the absorption of cholesterol. If that's a problem for you, this could be very helpful. And then they have a high antioxidant, going back to oxidative stress, they have a high antioxidant content, vitamin E and carotenoids in here. So really wonderful. I find pumpkin seeds, especially the salted kind, if you're kind of a salty snacker, those can be a nice substitute for a salty snack. And then the other ingredients we just need some kind of nut. I have chopped pecans. They do not even need to be chopped. You can put whole. I've used whole hazelnuts. I've used whole almonds. I've used whole pecans. I just happen to have chopped pecans. So that's what I'm going to use. And then I am going to use raisins. And the raisins I just have in there to counteract the bitterness in the tartary buckwheat. So we're also going to use a very minor, 1 tablespoon maple syrup to help with that as well, but it's not enough. And I think the raisins kind of just get a nice balance to that bitterness. And that is it. I think, I didn't tell you, so this recipe is a bread that I've been making for over 10 years. It was originally written by a gal named Sarah Breton on her cooking blog called My New Roots. And she came up with this. It's called Life-Changing Loaf of Bread. And it is life-changing because I know for me at the time, I was trying to do this very strict gluten-free diet, and I was Not happy with all the gluten-free substitutions because they tended to be, and I think they still are, very high in starches. And nowadays it's kind of just, there's a lot of junk ingredients in those kind of packaged gluten-free stuff. And any of the gluten-free recipes I was making, there was a lot of starch. And so I was really excited when I found this because I could make something, have just a little piece of toast in the morning, or if I wanted to make like a little open-faced sandwich, that can be very good. This is really good, and you can slice this bread up and put it in the freezer, and then toast it up every morning. It lasts forever in the freezer, no issues, and it'll toast beautifully. And then I've done either regular cream cheese or vegan cream cheese, and then some fermented vegetables over that. I've also made like an open-faced sandwich with bologna, which is one of my favorite meats. Don't get me started. And I've also just toasted it with like a tiny bit of nut butter and some strawberries over the top of it, or you could use a little bit of jam, or just to have it plain and toasted. It is absolutely delicious. It's just a nice a way to get some extra fiber, like say you're having a smoothie or you're just having like a protein shake that morning. Having a little bit of this just gives you a little more fiber to feel a little bit more full and a little bit more satisfied. And I feel so comfortable giving it. When my son was younger, he loved it, and it was great because I knew it was super good for you. Now, the original recipe, just FYI, called for oats, and you can make the original recipe. I'll make sure the link is there. The oats there, you want to make sure you're getting organic. Oats can be very high in glyphosate, and glyphosate can just kind of destroy your microbiome. So you really want to like minimize your exposure to glyphosate. And apparently regular oats, even like the gluten-free, non-organic, can be very high in glyphosate. So do be mindful and just, check me on that. You can look at consumerlabs.com. So what we're going to do is take literally all these ingredients, and as I'm mixing it, I'll put a pop-up of the amount, plus the the recipe will be in the show notes. But we're just going to mix all this into a bowl, all the dry ingredients, stir them up. Then we're going to mix our wet ingredients, and then we're going to just pour the two together. Basically, it makes this kind of gruel. And then we're going to pour it, glop it into this pan and kind of flatten it out. And then we're going to let this pan sit on the counter for 2 hours, or as much as overnight, which usually means 8 hours. I've gone as many as 12. However, I wouldn't recommend that because I think the final product ends up a lot more dry. So 2 hours is really ideal when you're using the Himalayan tartary buckwheat. I think if you're using the oats, you can definitely go the 12 hours, no issues. So that is what we're going to do. So we're going to mix it up. We're going to put it in this pan. I'm going to let it sit for a couple of hours, and then we're going to bake it for about 20 minutes. So 350 degrees, we're gonna bake it for 20 minutes, and then we pull it out of its container, flip it over, put it directly on the oven rack, and we're gonna bake it for another 40 minutes. You don't even have to flip it over, but that's why I have this in here. This makes it super easy to lift it out. You'll just have something underneath it, flip it out on there, and then kind of scoot it into the oven rack. Again, you'll see all of that and my very dirty oven back there, but at any rate. All right, let's get started. And all right, guys, here we go. As I put it in here, I will have a pop-up that shows the weight in grams of what I'm putting in there. And in the show notes, I'll do the equivalent of what it is in cups. Here we go. So we are going to use 135 grams of pumpkin seeds. Then we're going to use 90 grams of flax seed. We're going to use another 65 grams of nuts. I'm using pecans here. And then we are going to use 100 grams of the Himalayan tartary buckwheat. And we are going to use 2 tablespoons of chia seeds, 2 tablespoons of psyllium husk, a teaspoon of salt. And we're going to stir this all up just so it's nice and mixed. Then we're going to mix up our dry ingredients. That's good there. Now let's mix up our dry ingredients. We've got this is 1.5 cups of water. And then I've got 3 tablespoons of ghee that I'm going to add to that. and a tablespoon of maple syrup. And we're just going to mix that up. I'm also going to add some raisins to the dry mix here, actually. So those kind of crumble around. I'll mix those in, and then we're going to pour our liquids over the top. And just mix up the gruel. You'll see its consistency here in just a second. So I'm just using a spatula to mix it because it makes it easier to get up around the sides. It can be kind of sticky, but you can see how liquidy it is right now. But that Himalayan tartary buckwheat is really going to get absorbed. Okay, so then it's going to absorb all that water. Okay, then we're going to put it in our baking pan. Just make sure about that. It's just as simple as that. And then I am all about using up every inch, every square inch of your materials. So I use the spatula to really get in there and get all that stuff off the sides of the bowl. Okay. And like I said, you can see it's quite watery, but we're going to just let that sit on the counter for 2 hours. And between the chia seeds and the Himalayan tartary buckwheat and even the flax seeds, it's going to absorb a lot of that water and it's going to kind of solidify. But we need at least 2 hours, again, maximum of 12, but I wouldn't push it much past 6 if I were you, but 2 is, in my experience, pretty ideal. So I'll see you back here in 2 hours. So let me just kind of shake it so you can just see how liquidy it is right now, and we'll check it again in 2 hours. Okay, you guys, we are back. It's been 2 hours, and now you can see, like, this was really liquidy last time we saw it, and now it's like thick. I guess I could kind of dig in there so you can see it's all kind of thickened up. And we are going to put it in the oven, 350 degrees for 20 minutes. Okay. All right, we're going to put it into my little countertop Breville oven, which I love, love, love. All right, we'll see you in 20 minutes. Okay, our bread is done. We're going to grab it out of the oven. Well, it's the first 20 minutes is done, and I'm going to show you how we flip it. It smells so good. Smells wonderful. And I'm going to turn the oven back on. And we'll turn it to 40 something. So you just want to cut down the sides here because it will stick on these sides where the parchment paper isn't. And then it'll lift right out. Should come right out, hopefully. Okay. And then what I do is I put this over and flip it. And hopefully you got that. And then we just pull this off. Again, there's hot steam there, so be careful. And pull this off. Okay, and now you can see how it's steaming. It's going to need to cook another 40 minutes, 350 degrees, just like this. You can also put it directly on the oven rack. I just use that little grill rack because it's just easier to handle the bread, so that'll work just as well as long as the air can get all around it. That's it. Our bread is ready. Here we go. So now we need to let it cool. Let it cool for about 20-30 minutes. What we want to do right now is just kind of, you can't hear it because you probably can't hear this, but you want to be able to tap it and hear that it's, solid in there. So it should have kind of a nice, you'll just have to do it a few times and see, but I can tell this is ready. You don't want it to be still mushy in any way. It should be completely ready, and it's kind of crusty on the outside, which is great. So we are going to let this cool down, and I'll meet you back here in about, let's say 30 minutes. I'll cut it open so you can see what it looks like on the inside. All right. Okay. Nice and cool. I can touch it with my hands. I'm going to cut off just a little end here, and then you can kind of see, can you see that there? How it's just all beautiful on the inside. And I usually cut it, that's what, about 1/4 of an inch thick is what I cut it at. I get it all cut up, and then I'm going to put it in Ziploc bags. You can put it in any kind of container to freeze it. Just note that when you put these back together and put them in the freezer, they can sometimes stick together. So if you want to be extra careful, you can put a little bit of parchment paper between each layer. But that is it. Let me cut a couple of these off here. And you just put them in the freezer, and then in the morning or whatever time of day you decide you want something, you can put it in the toaster. See how beautiful that is? Isn't that cool? Anyway, you can see the raisins and the pumpkin seeds kind of cut on the angle, and then there's the pecans, and then the tartary buckwheat, and it smells, it's fantastic. So you can see it's kind of small. You can double the recipe. I do know of a bakery that does that. I'll put a link in the show notes about that. I just always get a little worried if I put too much thickness that it's going to take too long to bake. So I keep it thin like that. Plus, I mean, these are pretty calorie dense. I've never done, not on this new recipe, I certainly haven't done the calorie examination. I'll have to see if I can do that for you guys and see if I can come up with the nutrition info, because I'd imagine, especially with the tartary buckwheat, this actually might be quite nutritious and maybe a little less fat. I don't know. When I've done it in the past, though, I noticed it was pretty calorie dense. So I would definitely not have more than 2 pieces a day. And remember, there is a lot of fiber. Again, take note, you'll have to watch the colon blow commercial for a good laugh. So that concludes our bird bread, I say with air quotes around it, and it's just smells so fantastic. I can't wait to have some. So, and you can put butter on it as well if you like that. So good. This is fantastic. It's just such a nice way to have bread like something when you can't have bread, but it's also just a nice treat in it on its own, and it's just so healthy. So I do hope you make it, and if you do and you have any issues, please reach out with questions. It's a pretty forgiving recipe, so I'll link to the original. I'll link to the bakery in San Francisco that's making it kind of double thick, and they call it adventure bread. And of course, the colon blow commercial, we can't miss that. And of course, this recipe will be linked in there, and anything else that's necessary. So thank you guys for hanging out with me tonight, and I hope you have a wonderful week.